What's going on, guys? Brooks Anderson bringing you another video today. In today's video, I really want to touch on the turnover as well as a couple baits I would have tied on for this later October and moving into November period we are in. Definitely a lot going on, changing on Lake Lanier with the turnover. So we're going to touch on what that means for what section you are fishing and kind of how to notice what areas are going to be more productive than others and how to adapt to some of those areas that have some of that more stained water compared to some of that clean water you can still find out there. So we'll touch on all that good stuff. If y'all are interested in getting out on a guide trip, I do have plenty of available dates in November. I'm fully booked for October, so if y'all are interested in a trip in November, definitely check out my website down below. Love to get y'all scheduled and put y'all on some big spotted bass this fall. If you can't make it out with me on an actual guide trip, you can check out my fish tips down below. I have a weekly style report where I post all the hot locations and baits we're catching them on day in and day out, as well as some longer blog style reports that kind of give an overview for that month and just some broad concepts that y'all should look out for. But as far as the business side of things, that's everything. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the baits and what the turnover is, some things I'll look out for this fall on Lake Lanier. Let's jump into it. Alright, guys, let's kind of break down what the turnover actually is and what I look out for right now on Lake Lanier. So the turnover is essentially where the warm water and that cooler water are starting to mix, and it's often noticed as a lot of bubbles or just kind of a dark stained, almost brown tint to the water. It's not necessarily super muddy, but you can definitely tell that it's not the usual water clarity you're used to seeing out on Lake Lanier. And what that means is those fish are going to be moving like crazy. You're going to have some fish a little bit deeper, some fish just randomly suspended, and a lot of fish that actually push up a lot shallower on the banks and rock, clay, all that kind of good stuff. But when those fish are faced with those dirtier water conditions, they're actually primarily going to shift their feeding towards the bottom. What I mean by that is baits like a shaky head, a jig, crankbait, spinnerbait, anything that is going to kind of displace a little bit of water and be more bottom oriented is going to be a lot more effective than you trying to call those fish to the surface. Now on the flip side of things, there will still be areas that have clean water, and in those areas I will be targeting those fish with the top waters, flukes, sashimi swimmer, anything like that to get those fish to come up and eat. And it's kind of a big misconception that the turnover happens all at once. For example, spent the past week out on Lake Lanier guiding from Sunday all the way to Friday. Been an awesome week catching some really big spots with my clients, and kind of noticed that turnover really start around that Browns Bridge and above area, and it's actually made its way all the way to Van's Tavern and even into the chute a little bit. So definitely seeing it come down the lake really fast. Now the southern portion of the lake is still pretty clear, and that's where I will be targeting those fish with the top waters, flukes, jointed swim baits, all that good stuff. But when I do find myself in areas kind of that mid lake and even upper lake, I would definitely suggest trying to crankbait, spinnerbait, jig, worm, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a lot better option for you in that kind of stained water rather than trying to call those fish up all the way to the surface. But that's just kind of a broad overview of some things to think and look out for when you do notice those areas that do have a little bit more stain. Doesn't mean you can't catch fish in those areas. It just means you have to be a little more critical with your location and your lure presentation. So definitely keep that in mind. Me personally, I try to push the turnover as far away as I can. And what I mean by that is I look for the cleanest water for the longest possible time. So I'll often drive around the lake if it's on a trip, tournament, if I'm out there fun fishing. I want to find that cleanest water for that day, and usually if you find clean water, it can stay that way for a couple days a week, but eventually that turnover will hit that area. So some areas will flip quicker than others, so definitely just stay a little bit versatile and just kind of bounce around the lake and really fish your strengths. If y'all do like throwing a crankbait, jig and worm a lot, definitely that mid lake to upper portion is going to be an area to focus on right now. And if y'all do still like to try to catch them on top waters, flukes, all that like me, I would definitely stay towards the southern end of the lake. But that's a quick overview of what the turnover is, what it exactly means for Lake Lanier right now. So let's go ahead and jump into a few of the baits. Alright guys, now that we've kind of touched on the turnover and some things to look out for, I want to bring y'all 5 baits I would have tied on right now for the remainder of October and into November. These are baits that are going to be day in and day out producers. Some will be better on some days than others. You just kind of have to base the conditions on which ones you throw. But these are definitely winners in my book and some awesome baits I will be starting to throw now into November. So let's go ahead and jump into it. First and foremost, a bait that becomes really effective this time of year is a crankbait. We've already been catching a few. Two of my personal favorites for Lanier are the Spro. This is a Little John DD. This one is the 9 to 12 model and the color Cellmate. Just kind of an awesome crankbait right there. Catch a lot of big spots on it in October, and I like this one in the early fall just because it still mimics a bait fish really well, and you can get some awesome bites on some of those areas that we talked about, like those rocky clay points when those fish move up really shallow, and that turnover water when you do notice it's a little bit more brown. That's a absolute awesome crankbait for catching some big spots, even some largemouth at times on Lake Lanier in the early fall. And as we move into November, I kind of shift my cranking into a rock crawler. This one is no secret out there on Lake Lanier. This is the RK55 right here. This color is, I believe, Red River Crawl, just kind of a translucent orange and pink with a green back. Caught hundreds of really big spots on this one right here. Love this color, and this is one I will continue to throw all through November and December out there on Lake Lanier on some of those rocky places. Clay, sand, all that. Awesome bait to get up there real shallow, just kind of dredge it into the bottom. Those are 2 baits definitely right now I would start thinking about throwing. They become really effective in the fall out on Lanier. Secondly, I have a spinner bait right here. These happen to be the Spot Sticker Mini-Me's. As you notice, both of these have white on white blades. These are both willow blades. Really love this bait on those windier days in October and November. Like I said, when those fish aren't willing to come all the way to the surface, this is a awesome bait to switch to. This is a 1/2 ounce, and I'll also throw the 3/4 or 1 ounce a lot, just to keep that bait a little bit further down. But that's also a bait I'm going to primarily be targeting shallow brush, points, rock, any transition area at the mouths of a lot of these big creeks where those schools are pushing into. Been catching some actually this past week on these 2 right here on some of those windier days when it's a little bit difficult to get that fluke or that top water out over them. Definitely a producer and one I would throw in the next coming weeks, and definitely into that November period. Like I said, that's a Spot Sticker Mini-Me, so definitely 1/2 ounce, 3/4, 1 ounce, just kind of base it on the wind and depth you're trying to fish. But that is the go-to kind of end-all be-all spinnerbait for me out on Lake Lanier with those white on white blades. Now, a bait that I really enjoy throwing this time of year is a finesse style jig. This is just a tungsten little football jig, kind of small, compact. I have that paired up with a 4-inch Yamamoto twin tail trailer. That is my go-to jig trailer out on Lake Lanier 365. Doesn't matter if it's 80-degree water or 30-degree water, you're going to get that same consistent action on the fall and when you're dragging it with that 4-inch double tail grub. Love that little combo right there. Real compact and small, and get a lot of bites on it, get a lot of really big bites, but definitely a jig in November and these later weeks in October can put some really big spots in the boat for you. And another great option is still that top water. Like we talked about, when you do have some of those cleaner water conditions, I will still opt to call those fish to the surface. This one right here is I'm a Skimmer. Again, no secret, staple herring bait right here. Also like that Tackle one knocker, great bait in the fall. But these are baits I will throw at schooling fish over some of the shallow brush, point, shoals, all that good stuff when I am in areas that water clarity is still pretty green and clear. And I got 2 to 4 feet. That's an awesome bait to get them to come to the top. Definitely one you do not want to have not tied on for October and early November. Awesome bait right there, and a bait I will start throwing now and really into the winter, spring, all that, from pretty much later October, November, December, all the way to really April, is a Yamamoto Senko. This is a 5-inch, I believe. This color right here is green pumpkin amber laminate. Really like these colors just because, as you can see right here, it has a two-tone color base. Got a lot of contrast for those sunny days. It kind of has that lighter green pumpkin right there with that darker. Gives this spot a little bit something different to look at when they got two colors right there. So definitely check out the Yamamoto Baits 5-inch Senko. Typically, I'll rig that on a shaky head, pitch it to the fish I see up there shallow on some of those rocks and just those banks. This time of year you can catch some really big ones, and this is one in November that I throw a ton when those fish won't come up. But awesome bait in the fall and the winter. So those are a quick overview of 5 baits I would definitely start thinking about throwing. Like I said, the top water is something we've been throwing for a while, and I definitely will continue to, just kind of mixing it in a little more sparingly when I do see those conditions right. Crankbaits can be an awesome option early in the morning and throughout the day when you do have the correct wind. Similar to that spinnerbait, love throwing those, catch some really big spots on those, and kind of mixing in the jig and the worm in that turnover water, and then even in that clear water once that lake does flip a little bit later into those early weeks of November. So those are a few baits I would definitely have tied on if you are heading to Lake Lanier. And if some of these tips and concepts helped y'all, please leave a like and subscribe. If you are interested on a guide trip, definitely check out my website down below. Love to get y'all out there, but see y'all in the next one. Appreciate y'all tuning in.